Hi, everyone. Welcome. We're going to get started shortly. Thank you so much for joining us. Do feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. We'd love to hear where you are Zooming in from. We do hope you'll use the chat liberally throughout this conversation. We've got a powerhouse panel for you. We're really excited to get started in a moment. The chat is also hopefully a place where you can make connections with each other. So watch out for those. And if you have some questions specific to panelists, there's a Q&A button on the bottom of your screen. You should use that feature to write questions that come up for you throughout the conversation. So we'll get started in a moment. Thank you. All right, we'd love to see all of these greetings in the chat. As you continue to jump on and join us, please continue to introduce yourself. And thank you so much for taking time out of your day to learn with us. We just want to start with a couple of logistics. One is this quick disclaimer, just noting that opinions expressed are not necessarily an endorsement. So just keep that in mind. And then on the next slide, we'll give you our official welcome. Welcome to Elevating STEM Education in Rural Communities. This is a webinar that is part of the Department of Education's Raise the Bar, You Belong in STEM initiative. It's co-hosted by the department's rural team and the STEM team. My name is Mecca Smith. I'm a senior policy advisor in the office of Deputy Secretary Cindy Martin. I support P12 STEM initiatives, and I've been at the department for about 2 years. And it's been a pleasure as part of my work here to really support the STEM portfolio, and specifically the You Belong in STEM initiative, which started 2 years ago this month. And it part of this webinar series that we are currently in really provides us with an opportunity to go deeper into a lot of really great content areas. So we're excited to do that today. Just to highlight for you the 3 STEM priorities that we are relentlessly working toward, if you're not familiar with them. These priorities all came from feedback from our STEM stakeholders in the field, who a few years ago when we were doing listening round sessions said, you know, you really have to, at the department, have a focus on belonging. This is something that is essential for our students and for our teachers. to really ensure that they know that they belong in STEM. And from that, we established our goals around ensuring all of our students have a rigorous, relevant, and joyful STEM learning experience, ensuring our educators were inspired to join the field, to stay in the field, and also had opportunities to grow in their development, and to make sure that we were supporting all of our stakeholders to invest in STEM education in a really strategic and sufficient way, using all of the funds and resources available to them. We have a QR code here if you're interested in learning more about the Ed STEM work. You can also, most importantly, subscribe to our monthly newsletter where you can really stay updated on all of the latest and greatest that we are up to. So I just want to, again, thank you for joining us, and want to go ahead and turn it over to my colleague, Luke Ryan. He is the Acting Assistant Secretary in our Office of Career, Technical, and Adult Education, has been a tremendous partner and leader in this work, from our P-12 side to our CTE side to our adult ed side. And he's going to share some more about how this work intersects with his office in terms of all of the work that they're doing to support rural STEM education. Luke, please take it away.
All right. Good morning. Good afternoon. As Mecca shared, my name is Luke Ryan. I'm the Acting Assistant Secretary in the Office of Career, Technical, and Adult Education. If you're not familiar with OCTE, we provide support around 4 main federal programs. The first is we support the implementation of Perkins. So for all of my career and technical education advocates out there, we are excited to work with you. The second area is around adult education and family literacy, which is Title II, the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. We also provide support for correctional education programs nationally, and are very excited about the full reinstatement of Pell for justice impacted learners. And then the fourth area is we provide direct support to community and technical colleges nationally. I am so excited about today's webinar, but before I get into my excitement, I just want to say 3 quick things. The first is, Mecca, thank you for your leadership, and thank you for the Deputy Secretary's leadership in STEM education. It's so incredibly important. And then Julia Cunningham, thank you for your work in terms of rural engagement and rural support. You've just been instrumental as we work with communities across the country to expand both career and technical education as well as STEM education. So thank you both for your leadership. The second thing real quick is we have just a phenomenal set of panelists. So thank you for my colleagues, both in NSF and FFA, for your leadership nationally and with communities across the country to support STEM education. And Dr. Borders, who I've just recently met, you are exceptional. I'm truly excited to take the time today to learn more about your work. So thank you for your leadership. And then for the folks who are kind of joining today's webinar, thank you for your attendance. Thank you for leaning into STEM education. Thank you for thinking about how we can integrate community within our schools, and we can help celebrate and create opportunities for students to be their full selves in our classrooms in terms of their connections to communities, their development of their identities, and really grounding every student with a strong set of STEM skills and assets. So with that, this is STEM education and rural education are 2 of my favorite topics. I grew up in Bellefonte, Pennsylvania, which is in central Pennsylvania. So in a small family farmette, had a couple of agri-science businesses, both in the production of food and animals when I was a kid. And what I remember, particularly in middle school, is I had the opportunity to attend a technology education program, as well as an agri-science program at the time, which were really my first experience in STEM education. And what I remember is being asked to work with my peers, solve problems, think about how my education impacts my community. I was asked to share my thoughts and articulate the design of concepts and ideas that solved problems. And I remember feeling empowered. I remember feeling joy. And I remember that I was excited about getting to work in a school that really celebrated, my opinion, my ideas, and how I could work within my community to solve problems, which I thought was pretty amazing. And it's that same sense of desire and purpose that led me to pursue a career in education. And I started teaching middle school in a STEM education classroom in rural New Jersey. And I worked there for a number of years before I became a CTE teacher. And I had an engineering program that I also taught for several years. And as an educator, what I remember is that just the absolute joy that existed in a classroom that you could create with a group of students that often was both curricular and co-curricular. So there was the opportunity to develop relationships and help students build their skills both in the classroom, as well as help to create connections between students' experiences in school with the activities and events that they participated in and out of school space. So I'm, again, really excited about today's opportunity. So I'm going to talk through then kind of two things. So the first is just some resources that we have available to support CTE and STEM educators and some quick kind of tools that you can take advantage of and things that are a little bit turnkey. I'll also present a little bit of time on investments that are being made across our country that directly connect to STEM education in each of your communities. So the first thing I'll talk through is our Unlocking Career Success Initiative, which, as Mecca mentioned, falls under ED's broader Raise the Bar strategy. And through our Unlocking Career Success Initiative, we are really thinking about how we create career-connected learning opportunities for every student across the country. And if you use your phone or you want to look at the QR code, feel free. But essentially, we are trying to support high schools across the country to think about really 4 key policy endeavors. The first is career-connected dual enrollment programs, which we know are essential in helping the students build their academic and their post-secondary identities. The second is really focused around high-quality work-based learning experiences that allow students to develop skills both in the classroom and in the workplace. The third is really around the integration of industry-recognized credentials within our K-12 system to help students signal their skills and articulate the value that they can bring to employers as well as community-based organizations. And then the fourth is really around career navigation and advisement and making sure that students have kind of a system of supports that helps them to develop their identities and accomplish their education and career goals. So on the website, there are 3 quick resources that I want to draw your attention to. The first is if you are interested in your state's policies relative to these 4 areas, we have a policy heat map that's available for you to look at. And you can essentially see what types of policies, what types of funding streams, what types of opportunities exist in your state around dual enrollment, work-based learning, credentials, or career navigation and advisement. And again, you can use the QR code, and we'll also put some tools in the chat as well in terms of how to quickly access these resources. The second thing that I want to talk about from Unlocking Career Success is there are a number of playbooks. You know, many times CTE and STEM education programs are built on community, meaning that strong partnership between our K-12 system, community-based organizations, institutions of higher education, employers, right, and you name it. And essentially what we're hoping to do is equip the many, many actors that we know exist around high quality STEM and CTE environments with a practical set of resources that they can take to their communities. They can turnkey in terms of what best practices exist nationally. So there are on the website 13 different playbooks, whether you're a principal, a teacher, a superintendent, industry partner, a community-based organization, a local workforce board, you know, you name it. There's essentially a playbook that is available for you that you can take a look at that helps to showcase ways in which we can add to and build strong STEM and strong CTE ecosystems across the many communities that we represent. And then the third thing that I'll point out from this website is our investment around career-connected high schools. So we were really excited to launch a new grant competition just a couple of years ago that was focused on how communities across our country can integrate career and technical education, dual enrollment, work-based learning, credentials, and career navigation and advisement. And what's really exciting about the applicants and the awards that were made is the majority of the investment went to rural communities across America. So essentially there are 19 grantees across 17 states, 60% are rural local education agencies. And we are really excited about this opportunity to provide direct funding to communities that we know are growing and increasing their STEM and CTE ecosystems. So I'm very excited about those resources. The second resource on this page that I want to draw your attention to is the grants page for the U.S. Department of Labor. There are so many Department of Labor programs that also benefit and impact rural America and rural communities across our country. So if you are not aware and you're not checking those things out, I would highly encourage you to take a quick look at the grants, competitions, and programs that the U.S. Department of Labor also supports in terms of supporting rural education and rural STEM education across our great country. All right, with that, I'm going to jump to the next slide. And this is really meant to showcase Invest in America. So if you're not familiar with Invest in America, it essentially represents three very big pieces of legislation. The first is the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, the second is the Inflation Reduction Act, and the third is the CHIPS and Science Act. Collectively, those three pieces of legislation represent a $2 trillion investment in our country in terms of how we move forward clean energy, how we improve our nation's infrastructure, and how we think about advanced manufacturing across many different communities, many different states. And there is, to this point, about $600 billion that has been invested through these various programs, through these various pieces of legislation in communities all across the country. And essentially, this website will kind of map and provide you with information around where those investments are being made, to whom those grants or those dollars were allocated, for what purpose, and then kind of the timeline around those projects. But what's particularly important is there's still about $1.4 trillion that's yet to be invested. And kind of a cornerstone of each of these investments is this ecosystem that we're talking about: partnerships between K-12 institutions of higher education, workforce practitioners, community practitioners, that kind of undergird each of these investments and ensure that we have strong talent pipelines, and again, in manufacturing, energy, and infrastructure, which we all know directly connect with STEM education programs across our country and CTE programs across our country. So we're really excited about these investments. We're really excited about opportunities that these dollars will create in terms of connecting STEM education programs and career and technical education programs with really good jobs, and the tens of millions of jobs that these investments will create across our country, but particularly in rural communities across our country. All right, so the very last thing, we have two quick announcements. The first is, I guess I have two things, sorry. So if you are curious about who is benefiting from these resources, agencies work in this space relative to Invest in America, this is a resource that will provide in follow-up to today's webinar. But this gives you essentially a quick, fact sheet in terms of who are the points of contact for departments of transportation, departments of energy, departments of commerce, departments of labor in each of your various states and communities, as well as different opportunities for funding, and then other resources that we've specifically curated for educators. On the bottom left, you also have a list of folks who are leading education to workforce activities in each of your states and communities. So our state CT directors, state school chiefs, adult education directors, state SHIOs, as well as individuals who lead departments of correction. So again, an exciting opportunity to continue to build your network and make sure that your work is aligned with other state initiatives and other initiatives that are being led locally relative to the Invest in America portfolio. And then the very last thing, two quick announcements. So the first is Octay, our office launched a Power Your Future Challenge. What this essentially is helping to advance clean energy in local schools. And there are 10 teams that we will award up to $50,000 to kind of think through and execute on those initiatives. Applications for the Power Your Future Challenge are due November 19th. And then the very last one is we recently relaunched a CTE CHIPS Challenge. So this is essentially working with schools and communities across the country to compete for a for a $1 million prize pool that essentially creates kind of supports for students to expand their STEM and CTE experiences that directly align with advanced manufacturing and semiconductor production, but also to support educators in CTE and STEM programs across the country. Applications for the CTE CHIPS Challenge are due on December 20th of this year. So excited about two direct opportunities that are right around the corner to support both STEM educators and CTE educators. And with that, I think I am turning it back over.
Thank you so much, Luke. Appreciate all of those resources. Very, very rich and important, and we want to make sure that everyone is able to access those. We are going to share the recording, share the list of resources, share the links with everyone who was registered post-webinar. So if you weren't able to catch the QR codes, it's all right. We will make sure that you get that. So now that you have heard of some of the department's investments, some of our initiatives in rural and STEM education, we want to get to the meat of our conversation and introduce our powerhouse panelists. So I'm going to start with my colleague, Abigail Swisher. She's going to moderate this discussion. Abigail is the Rural Impact Fellow here at ED. Joining her will be Dr. Corrine Borders, currently serving as the Executive Director of the STEM Instruction and Outreach at the West Sound Network. In addition, we have Dr. James Moore, the Assistant Director of STEM Education at NSF, the National Science Foundation. And we, of course, are rounded out by Dr. Travis Park, the National FFA Advisor and Board Chair at the National FFA Organization. So welcome, panelists, to our virtual stage. To all of our participants, I hope that you can listen and learn with an ear for how their work that they're leading within their communities is sustainable and replicable and scalable. There's a lot of wonderful wisdom that they have to share with you. I will kick it over to you, Abigail. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mecca, and thank you all for being here today. I'm really delighted to be with this group of people to talk about something that's very close to my heart. I started my career as a rural STEM educator in North Carolina. I see there are a lot of North Carolina folks here today. I taught 5th grade science and engineering, and it is really my first love. So I'm really pleased to see just how many people are here today because you care about advancing STEM education for all of our rural learners. Really pleased to have this panel of folks here who are doing a really diverse array of work around the country. And I'm going to have them start by each briefly sharing with the audience, the work that they lead and how it touches rural communities. We're going to start with Dr. Borders, and then we'll go to Dr. Moore and Dr. Park.
Great, thank you, Abigail. Just absolutely delighted to be here. So as mentioned, I'm the Executive Director for West Sound STEM Network, and we are located in Washington State, the Pacific Northwest. And we serve and partner with communities across 5 counties, Clallam, Jefferson, Kitsap, Mason, and Pierce. And it's important to note that we are really an ecosystem. So when the Assistant Secretary talked about an ecosystem, that just touched my heart. Our network is an ecosystem of pre-K through 12, higher education, industry, business, workforce, government, tribes, community-based organizations, nonprofits, and more. It's a reflection of our community. There are over 80 network member organizations. And really, I could just sum it up probably in one sentence. We all come together to ensure that there are pathways from early learning through workforce for youth, and especially in rural and remote communities.
Good afternoon. My name is James Moore, and I'm the Assistant Director for the Directorate for STEM Education within the National Science Foundation. We focus on every juncture of education, what I like to say K to gray, elementary, secondary, post-secondary, and the workforce development. We're the largest entity within the federal government, arguably in the private and the public sector that funds educational research, particularly in STEM. We're poised and laser focused on creating opportunities everywhere. We know that opportunities don't always prevail in some of the most vulnerable, under-resourced communities in the country, and that's included in rural America. In CHIPS and Science, they underscore the importance of STEM rural education, and that gave us a launching pad to focus on rural education in ways that we haven't really focused on, but we've always been an investor in this space. But the CHIPS and Science legislation gave us an opportunity to amplify and to leverage our human and financial resources in this space. Very excited to be here, and I look forward to participating on this panel.
Good afternoon. I'm Travis Park. I serve as the National Director for Agricultural Education for the National Council for Agricultural Education, and then also as the Chair of the Board of Directors for the National FFA organization. And we just finished our National FFA convention in Indianapolis last week with almost 72,000 high school, middle school, FFA members who are agricultural education students, and then their teachers and supporters as well. So if I look a little tired, it's because we came off of a 10-day convention with 70,000 people in the city. But I grew up on a small farm in rural Indiana and taught high school agriculture in Indiana. Currently, I also am a professor of agricultural education at North Carolina State University. So rural STEM and rural, the challenges and opportunities faced by rural students is near and dear to my heart, and the focus of our work really within the Council for Agricultural Education and the National FFA organization. I'm excited to be a part of the conversation this afternoon and both listen and learn from the panelists as well.
Thank you all so much. The first question that we're going to have for one of our panelists is for Dr. Borders. I know that West Sound Network, a big part of the work that you do is grounded in geography and culture, and specifically the geography and cultures of the communities you serve. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about how that's influenced your goals and the way that you design instruction for students.
Sure, thank you so much. So we really want to ensure that we're partnering with communities and that programming is not done to communities, but with. As far as the geography, water, mountains, forests, they're prominent features of the community. It also impacts access and opportunities and community identity. For example, we're surrounded by water in many areas, and a lot of our communities and partners have a close relationship based on the water, whether that's fishing or maritime. We also have a federal lab, Pacific Northwest National Laboratory in our region, or military endeavors. We're also home to a national park, and forestry is important there. Again, as I mentioned, we're cross-sector, and so our K-12 schools, due to some of the geography, may be very remote and rural. We also have schools serving a military base, and also schools serving tribal communities, which just imparts such a richness to our network and community. Industries that are important based on some of the geography include maritime, cybersecurity and computer science, construction, engineering, advanced manufacturing, aviation and aerospace, clean energy, biomedical and healthcare, agriculture, and more. And so we want to make sure that our youth can see themselves in STEM and see themselves in these careers. Our higher education partners and business partners, workforce or CTE directors are critical to this. And so when we think about designing instruction, there are 4 points. One of those is career advising and making sure that kids can see themselves in STEM. And we know this is important for rural revitalization, economic development, diversifying the workforce, and just, again, that geography. So some of our youth may need to travel 2 to 3 hours if they're going to a debate tournament or sports tournament or to visit a science center. But we know it's important for our youth to see themselves in STEM, and we often say you can't be what you can't see. So we, at the request of districts and communities, bring STEM professionals into classrooms for an interactive experience. There's a program called STEM Like Me that was developed by one of our network partners and Director Deb Bowen that they have graciously shared with us. And we are partnering with them to, again, bring STEM professionals into classrooms so kids can see themselves in those careers. If you don't know about something, it's hard to pursue that. But then also articulating the pathways to those post-secondary credentials, and post-secondary meaning anything beyond high school, like a certificate, the military, 2-year degree, 4-year degree. And then another piece about when we design instruction is co-creation. And so we don't design for, we design with, and that's key and really important. I was a classroom teacher for 20 years and often experienced times where an outside agency was excited to fix something within the school, the district, with education in general. And so we design with. The third point is approaching with humility and open to learning. And we endeavor every day to use an asset approach, also while recognizing systemic barriers. And then, with that humility, being really open to learning. For example, we have a tribal advisory. We know that one person or one organization cannot be the expert in everything. And so our tribal advisory is led by the Jamestown S'Klallam tribe and Suquamish tribe. Just again, being open to that learning and empowering others. And then finally, we think about when we design experiences or curriculum is a systems level approach at the same time as on the ground. So we concurrently engage in those co-created program deliveries, and then also collectively ask, are there opportunities within the system, we, all of us being the system, to do better? And then with that, we do seek out, I know funding is always an issue. So we seek out funding to help support that. We are not automatically entitled to anything. So we look at diverse funding that will meet the needs. We recently received a Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation grant to focus on things that we know position our youth for a pathway to post-secondary credential by utilizing high quality career and college advising, increased financial aid completion, and increased dual credit articulation. And that's all woven into how we think about designing, co-designing, and co-creating experiences and curriculum.
Thank you for that. I know later in the conversation, we'll definitely follow up more on the idea of co-creation as being so integral to this work, and particularly with the communities that you serve. On a related note, Dr. Park, I want to ask you, so FFA's history, right, is in agriculture, and that's reflected in the org's original name, Future Farmers of America. And since then, y'all have shortened your name to reflect the range of careers that you prepare students to be part of. And I'm wondering, as our rural communities are looking to the future and adapting to the changing landscape of our planet and changing industries, what lessons can we learn from your approach? You're preparing students for the future and also honoring the history of your organization and really celebrating rural tradition.
Thank you. And I was struck by Dr. Border's asset approach, certainly, and then being humble and open to learning. And I think that represents our stance in agricultural education as well, in that we want to continue to emphasize and focus on our agricultural roots and, the agricultural careers that have helped to develop our country and many communities and provide great careers for a lot of people. Of our now just over 1 million FFA members, and we estimate about 1.25 million agriculture students across the nation, approximately 2/3 of those are in rural spaces and 1/3 in urban and suburban spaces. So, and the growing area, right, is just like the population typically in the suburban and urban areas. So we face this tightrope walk of tension between continuing some of our legacy programs that are steeped in agriculture tradition and the agriculture workforce, while also embracing new technologies that are on the rise and that really propel the agriculture industry. And so it is a balance between that traditional approach and then what's new. And just an example is, we have events and programs for our students focused very much in production agriculture. We have a New Century Farmers program that brings those young people, typically out of high school age, but fresh out of high school, who have opportunities for farm operations and farm businesses. Some of those are quite large and some are pretty modest, but we bring those folks together for additional networking and business training, really, to help launch their enterprises. We also have in National FFA a Next Generation Conference. We call it Next Gen Conference, focused on different career pathways. So on animal systems, plant systems, technology, education and communication system, where upper high school students who know that they're interested in one of these career areas, many of them focused in STEM, they can go and begin their professional network with other students across the nation. So those are really focused in traditional ag areas. We've also partnered with Microsoft recently and their Farm Beats program to put Raspberry Pi, I think I've got that right. It's not strawberry pie or rhubarb pie, but Raspberry Pi computer platforms in students' hands where they can do some basic programming, and then in their school greenhouse or in their work-based learning project outside of school, they can gather data and analyze those data and make informed data-driven decisions about a greenhouse operation or another agricultural operation at their home. And so that's, for us, really cutting edge. And that's all in addition to curriculum that is more and more focused on sensors and drones and big data and collecting those data so that agriculturalists can continue to be quite productive while at the same time sustaining and supporting the local environment. So it's always a tension to balance between the well-developed agriculture traditions across our country, but then also introducing those students in rural and urban and suburban areas to new technologies that really enable us to use our resources more wisely in agriculture.
Thank you. That's really exciting work. And I imagine from what you're describing, really exciting to students as well. Dr. Moore, I want to sort of take it a little broader here. For the last year, the Directorate for STEM Education at NSF has focused on and traveled to rural communities to better understand the landscape of rural STEM. And I'm wondering if you could give the audience a sense of really the landscape of rural STEM education today as you're seeing it. Where are you seeing equity and access gaps in rural STEM, and where has NSF been making investments to close those gaps?
Yeah, well, thank you for that question, and thank you for moderating this very important panel. This area of rural STEM education, it gave us an opportunity to look behind the curtain and shatter some of the myths and share some of the realities. And some of those realities we're very laser focused and infusing in our current investment models within the directorate. We know that many of these rural areas, they're hemorrhaging from opportunities to have access to quality STEM courses, right? In some districts, they're still grappling with being able to find teachers who are certified or licensed in some of the advanced mathematics courses or science courses. We know that immense talent exists in some of these areas, but opportunities don't always prevail because of access. We know in these rural areas, in some, they're food deserts, some, they're broadband deserts, right? Having access to technologies where they can realize their dreams and aspirations. As I noted before in the CHIPS and Science Act, it underscored the significance of making investments in rural America. I would be remiss if I said that we weren't already making those investments, but it made us a little bit more focused. Not only that, making sure that we have expertise on our advisory committee within the directorate, making sure that we develop the right teams, that we understand what the issues are, that we don't impose a Washington, D.C. perspective, that we are able to understand the nuanced perspective. We want all communities, and in this case, rural communities, to know that they are part of the United States of America And in turn, they are inclusive of our noble vision and mission. And in order for us to realize it, this vision and mission, we know we have to fund the right people and the right ideas. And if we want to address some of the grand challenges of our time in education in rural America, it's important that we shatter some of the myths and share some of the realities around the funding opportunities that exist within our directorate. And not that it's exclusive, but we have specific targets that we have to meet as an agency around what we call F-score states. And these are states that bring in less than $50 million of federal funding. And I'm proud to say, in the next couple of weeks, we'll be going to the Delta region of Arkansas, Mississippi, and Louisiana. And we will have about 30 program officers, along with our colleagues at the U.S. Department of Education and other agencies, that will be going to that region to share what are the many opportunities that are available that can serve as primers to improve some of the educational grand challenges that they are trying to address. Not only that, we're taking our AC, what we call our advisory committee. They'll be there along. So we'll be there a week. It'll be a week of activities, some face-to-face, some online. Something that my mother said, she worked in social services for 30 plus years, and she said, you can't help people if you don't spend time with people. And it's an opportunity to spend time with the communities. It's a test, it's a pilot that we're utilizing. We haven't did something like this of scale before. But the intent, if it works out well, that we'll have one AC meeting a year in DC, and we'll have another AC meeting in a place in America that could benefit from NSF investments. And investments doesn't mean that we're necessarily going to be giving money away, but we want to make sure that we can shatter the myths around the grant process, as well as inform communities of what are the possibilities that exist within the National Science Foundation. Let me just say, there's a healthy enthusiasm within the halls of NSF about us going to the Delta region. But equally as important, from what I gleaned from some of our coordinators of this project, is that the community is just very happy that NSF will prioritize them in this way. And so stay tuned for more, because these challenges are not unique to the K-12 continuum. We find that these challenges follow students all throughout their educational journeys. What I'm proud of, when you said some programs, I'm proud of a number of programs. And the day you walk into the halls of NSF, you just hold your head up high, because you're proud of the things that, and proud of the colleagues that you get to work with on a day-to-day basis. But more importantly, you're proud of the work that we do across America. And so we have our scholarship for science, technology, and engineering mathematics. We know that the average family income in some of these areas are pretty low. And college, for some, will foreclose on college because they don't think it's attainable, because they may not think they have the means. And so this program focuses on Pell eligible students, and the CHIPS and Science legislation enabled us to increase it from $10,000 for undergraduate education, 2 or 4 year, to now $15,000. And for a graduate education from $10,000 to $20,000. As you probably can imagine, Abigail, is that college is increasing higher than the inflation rates. And we know that a STEM degree costs more than a non-STEM degree. We do not want a student who have the capacity and capability to foreclose on a STEM degree because they don't have the means. And so we're vigilant and laser focused on trying to create opportunities. This program is not exclusive to rural communities, but it certainly impacts a number of young people across the United States from rural America. I'll say one more thing. I want to talk about the community college, which is a place that is in close proximity. We know that underrepresented Pell eligible students tend to disproportionately, if they go to college, they tend to go to a college in close proximity to where they live. And typically those institutions, in most cases, they don't always have the same resources. And we're very laser focused on it, particularly at the community college, because community colleges are designed with the community in mind. They can pivot a lot easier than some of our research institutions. And with that being said, our storied, highly esteemed, advanced technological education program that focus on um, middle job skills, dual enrollment, building capacity at community colleges, and community colleges going to continue to play a key role. And in our society, we're expecting them to play even a more expansive role in rural America and beyond, particularly because you can drive, I'm from South Carolina. My academic home is Ohio State, and you can drive in Ohio and South Carolina for hours, and you might be hard pressed to find two physics teachers in some of these rural communities. And as a result of that, you can find that in many of our other advanced STEM courses. But in most community colleges, you can take a calculus course, you can take a variety of biology courses and physics and et cetera. Community colleges are reservoirs of opportunities that people will need to be able to access to ensure that young people can realize their dreams and aspirations. I'll stop there because I could take the whole webinar, and I want to be sensitive to our beloved colleagues.
Well, I so appreciate your response and for everything that NSF is doing. I appreciate especially your lifting up some of the dire shortages of STEM educators in rural communities. I know that we have folks who are putting things in the Q&A, and I want to remind you to continue to add your questions. Some of them are going to be answered by our colleagues live, and some of them we may also read out to our panelists. But the next question that I wanted to ask as we get close to the end here is about place-based education. I think that those of us who've taught in rural communities or grew up in rural communities know that our rural kids can have a really powerful sense of place. And that is such an asset to educators who are tapping into that when they design instruction. And Dr. Park and Dr. Borders, I wonder if you could each share just very briefly more about the benefits of teaching STEM when you're engaging kids to solve problems in their own communities.
I would just say that for us in agricultural education, the heart of agricultural education is in the local schools, certainly, and in many of those cases, it's the rural communities, and so everything we do is really totally focused on equipping that local teacher. And for us in agricultural education, like many places in education, it's becoming tougher to find teachers who are trained through a traditional teacher preparation program. So we're working with a lot of teachers who come out of business and industry, which is great for us in agriculture because then those teachers have the connections to business and industry and in addition to the local community as well. So, but we've got programs, I'm thinking of a couple. One is an Ag Issues Forum, where our students research local agricultural issues and identify the nature of the issue and propose solutions to those issues. And all of that is locally based. And so what we know from research is that the more students understand their local communities and feel agency to impact in a positive way those local communities, the more likely they are to remain in local communities and find good careers there. So we feel like that's a great opportunity for us. Additionally, we're launching a program called FFA Ventures, which is an investment into local agricultural entrepreneurs. A qualification for that investment is that those entrepreneurs need to be have a place in their community and also have a community vitality component to their proposal before we would invest in that. And so in that way, we're marrying both the opportunity for investing in someone's business or someone's entrepreneurial program, as long as they also have ways to enrich their local community. And we feel like those are tied to our mission in ag education and the National FFA organization to both build careers in agriculture, but also invest in the communities where those people who are engaged in agriculture live and work.
I can add a couple of examples, and something that Dr. Parks said really struck me, where students are defining the problem and designing solutions and leading investigations. So that's part of that co-creation. So Abigail, you asked about the benefits of teaching STEM through the lens of learning about students' local community and working to solve local problems. Absolutely critical. And I would say that goes back to that co-creation. I'll kind of put some context that we also directly work with educators to do that. So we have 6 teacher cohorts that focus on an increase in content knowledge, a foundation of equity, helping teachers operationalize that to the classroom, and then empowering teacher leadership. And so 2 examples come from those teacher cohorts with co-creation. We have a computer science initiative, and we really embraced that place-based asset, I guess, and partnered with the Suquamish tribe. It's one of our earliest tribal partners. We provide a lot of PD, computer science is an area of focus. And instead of doing what's often done when PD is delivered, like creating a program and bringing it to the community, we engaged in co-design and co-creation from the start, with an outcome that was and is place-based, it's culturally relevant and empowering. And we base the PD instruction on Indigenous use of algorithmic thinking, coding, sequencing, basically being done from time immemorial, including locally relevant career-connected learning. And what it looked like, we kicked off the cohort at House of Awakened Culture, which is the Suquamish Longhouse. It's a beautiful structure with a great deal of symbolism. Tribal elders spoke about the data that's used around current and water temperature and other data, and how that impacts fishing and oyster farming. They also shared about navigation by the stars, and teachers engaged in computer science through place-based learning, like water current data analysis via lab activities and investigation into satellite data from NOAA and NASA. And then we're able to operationalize that to their classroom. And that experience, and then the experience that was then taken to the classrooms, looked very different than maybe what a traditional PD would look like. A second example, and I saw a lot of notes in chat about sometimes the internet issues of, of communities that are rural, and we certainly experience that a lot. A second example was actually funded by NSF through the Ocean Observatories Initiative, which has cable laid across the ocean floor, the sound, with a variety of sensors. So our teacher cohort was able to learn about that, but then also design with student-led voice, because that co-creation, student voice and being student-led is important. Using research level sensors and data in their communities to define a problem, to decide what kind of data would be needed to solve that problem, and to design a solution. So that student voice came up with things like accessing data on light attenuation and how it impacts eelgrass restoration in Sequim, Washington, to optimum stream temperature for salmon release in Port Orchard, to terrestrial data from composting bins. Those were all very locally relevant and student and teacher led, and definitely place-based, along with that's so important, career connected learning. So those are two examples of how place-based plays out in our region.
Thank you so much. I have to say, I really wish I could take some of these course offerings. It's like incredible work and so cool. You all are doing fantastic work and so appreciative of this panel. As we are heading to the end here, I am going to turn it over to my colleague, Julia Cunningham. I do want to acknowledge we got a lot of fantastic questions in the chat, really all provocative and so important. And I am sad that we won't be able to answer all of them today, but we really do wish to keep in touch with all of you and keep this conversation going. So thank you very much. And without further ado, I'll turn it over to Julia Cunningham, our Director of Rural Engagement in the Office of Communications and Outreach here at ED. Thanks, Julia.
Yeah, thank you, Abigail, not only for your incredible moderation of this panel, but also for all of your work on this webinar and everything that you do to support rural schools and students every day. I also really want to thank our amazing panelists, Dr. James Moore, Dr. Travis Park, Dr. Corinne Borders. Your insights really so valuable, as you can just tell from the amount of engagement that we've had in the chat, in the Q&A. Really, I can say, having hosted so many webinars in my life, this is one of the most active that I've ever seen. And so really appreciate your insight and really looking forward to continuing to work together to drive rural STEM education forward. Also want to thank Luke. Everything you shared was so helpful, so practical, so important, and your leadership is always valued to us. And then also just finally want to echo the thanks to Mecca, Robbie, Deputy Secretary Martin, and their entire team for their leadership in STEM education, and you're really truly making a difference everywhere. I mostly want to thank all of you, though, for taking the time to join us today. I think I speak for a lot of people in education when I say that it's easy to sometimes feel disconnected from the larger picture. So it's refreshing and empowering to not only see so many of you engaged in the conversation, but to read through the chat and hear about all the amazing work you're doing and how engaged and invigorated and energized you are to keep this work moving. So I'll just end with saying that as demonstrated by our panelists and what you all have shared, it's clear that rural communities, and this is something I think many of us already know, are filled with innovative, forward-thinking, highly driven leaders who know more than anyone what their individual and specific communities need to thrive. Our goal as a department, and Dr. Moore noted this when he was talking, is not to come into rural communities and put this Washington, D.C. perspective into all of the work that you're doing and try to, upend all the great knowledge and insight that you already have. But instead, we really aim to break down those silos that have historically been a challenge for rural communities who are looking to access federal resources in order to provide the technical assistance, the funding access, and the flexibilities that allow for rural self-determination and rural prosperity. Our goal and kind of my North Star in a lot of the work that we do is that anyone who wants to live and work in a rural community doesn't need to leave the rural community that they love to find high quality jobs, self-fulfillment, and access to high quality future thinking innovations in technology. So thank you to all of you for the work that you're doing to make this a reality. And I know that we still have a long way to go, but I know that, this is a really great example of how so many people are working towards these exact same goals. So with that, I know that Sam, and I also want to thank Sam who's been sharing all the links in the chat, but I know that Sam is going to share a couple more links in the chat. But that includes a link to our rural newsletter that goes out monthly, Rural School and Community Updates. So please feel free to register, or subscribe to that, as well as our Rural Relevant Grants one-pager that just provides some information on various grants that may be relevant to the work that you are doing that we've seen be of particular interest to our rural communities. And finally, a link to our STEM website, which goes through a lot of the resources that Mecca and her team have put together to make sure that people have access to what they need to provide high quality STEM education. So with that, thank you again so much. Thank you for everything that you do, and thank you for your engagement. And we look forward to having you on future webinars and continuing this conversation. Thanks. And I think we can end there and appreciate you all.